Iowa versus Ohio State college football pick. This one goes off here on Saturday. Iowa fell to 3-3 after their 9-6 road defeat at Illinois. Another poor offensive performance for the Hawkeyes, posting just 222 yards. They ran for only 52 yards on 30 carries. On defense, Iowa did allow 200 rushing yards to the final line on 45 carries. Spencer Petras completed 50% in the loss. He had a pick, 4.7 yards per attempt. This season, Petras, season lows, 54% completion, 5.8 yards per attempt. Now, Ohio State 6-0. They rout Michigan State on the road. On the road, they do this 49-20. The Buckeyes moved the football for 614 yards, 237 rushing on 46 carries. They stuffed the Spartans offense for 7 rushing yards and 195 passing on 28 attempts. C.J. Stroud completed 81% of his passes in that game, 6 touchdowns, a pick, about 14 yards per attempt on the season. Stroud over 70% completion rate, 11 yards per attempt. The Buckeyes' speed and execution on offense will be too much for Iowa. Just can't trust the Hawkeyes' offense to produce much. The player will be Ohio State at -29. Kansas versus Baylor college football pick Saturday. Kansas fell to 5-2 after their 52-42 road defeat at Oklahoma. Jayhawks defense were crushed here, gave up 701 yards. They surrendered 298 rushing on 57 carries, 403 yards passing on 43 attempts. Jayhawks moved the football for 430 yards, rushing for 165 on 35 carries. Jason Bean completed 59% in the loss, 9.8 yards per attempt. He had 4 touchdowns but 2 picks on the season, being at 64% completion rate, 10.4 yards per attempt. Baylor fell to 3-3 with their 43-40 road defeat at West Virginia, a season high 590 yards for the Bears. But in this one, 169 yards rushing on 35 carries. But the Baylor defense allowed 5.5 yards per rush, 283 passing yards on 37 attempts. Kyron Drones entered for an injured Blake Shapen and completed 50% of his passes for 6.8 yards per attempt. In limited action, Drones 61% completions, 9.5 yards per attempt. Drones the concern at quarterback as Shapen, the hit he took last week to the head with that cushion really looked bad. Being a backup with starting experienced player will be Kansas at +9. Kansas State versus a TCU college football pick Saturday. Kansas State moved to 5-1 after their 10-9 road win at Iowa State. Wildcats gained 388 yards in the win with 131 rushing on 38 carries. Defensively, Kansas State did limit the Iowa State run game and allowed 198 passing yards on 38 carries. Adrian Martinez completed 63% of his passes, season high here, 13 yards per attempt. Heavy running day for Martinez, 77 yards on 19 carries. This season, Martinez 62% completions, no picks, career low 6.5 yards per attempt. TCU moves to 6-0 after a 43-40 home overtime victory to Oklahoma State. Another strong offensive performance here as the Horned Frogs produced 510 yards, 224 of it rushing. The defense did allow 386 yards to the Cowboys with 245 passing. Max Duggan completed season lows here, 57% with completion with 7.2 yards per attempt. He did produce 286 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. Now on the season, Duggan career highs here, 69% completions, 9.5 yards per attempt, 16 touchdowns, and only 1 pick on the year. Horned Frogs at home averaging 602 yards, while Kansas State on the road allowing 264 passing yards and 5.1 yards per rush. Play here, Kansas State and TCU over 54.5. Minnesota versus Penn State college football pick Saturday. Minnesota fell to 4-2 after their 26-14 road defeat at Illinois. Golden Gophers, a season low, 180 yards, 142 rushing on 24 carries. Minnesota surrendered 472 yards to the fight Illini with over 4 yards a carry and 252 passing yards on 32 attempts. Tanner Morgan completed a season low 33% in the loss with a pick and 1.8 yards per attempt. He took a shot to the head, wasn't expected participant in practice. Cole Kramer, the backup if Morgan can't play, he's thrown 13 passes in his 3 seasons as a backup. Penn State 5-1 after their 41-17 road defeat at Michigan. The Lions, a season low 268 offensive yards. They rushed for 111 yards on 22 carries. The Penn State run defense got hammered by Michigan for 418 yards on 55 carries. Sean Clifford practiced this week after an upper body injury last week. The signal caller season lows here, 37% completions, 6.3 yards per attempt. On the year, season low here, career low, 59% completions, 7.4 yards per attempt. Golden Gophers are a strong running team, and the Nittany Lions showed weakness, stopping the run last week in a big way. Golden Gophers defense allowing just 263 yards a game. Play here, Minnesota plus 5.5. Mississippi versus LSU college football pick. This one is on Saturday. Ole Miss improved to 7-0 after their 48-34 home win to Auburn. Rebels gained 578 yards in the win, 448 rushing on 69 attempts. On defense, they limited Auburn pass attack but surrendered 301 yards on the ground on 48 rushes. Jackson Dart, a season low 47% completions, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick, 6.8 yards per attempt. Dart completed 52% with 7.3 yards per attempt in a step-up game against Kentucky. LSU 5-2 after their 45-35 road win at Florida. Tigers moved the football here for 528 yards with 179 rushing on 38 carries. LSU did allow 199 rushing yards on 34 carries and held the Gators' passing game in check. Jaden Daniels, 72% completions in the win, 3 touchdowns, and SEC high 11 yards per attempt. Season-wide, Daniels, 69% completions, 10 touchdowns, a pick, 7.5 yards per attempt. A run threat who has 90 rushes on 403 yards. Dart accuracy, the issue for Ole Miss against the strong teams on his schedule. Daniels has produced better numbers against the tougher competition. Play here will be LSU minus 1.5. Mississippi State versus Alabama college football pick. This one goes off on Saturday. Mississippi State fell to 5-2 at 27-17 road defeat at Kentucky. Bulldogs, a season low 225 yards with 22 rushing on 10 carries. Defensively, they did allow nearly 5 yards a carry with 239 yards passing on 25 attempts. Will Rogers, 67% completions for only 5.5 yards per attempt. Lost at LSU, he averaged a season low 5.1 per attempt. Now Alabama drops to 6-1, a 52-49 road loss at Tennessee. Crimson Tide rolled up the offense, though, 569 yards, 114 though on the ground, only on 31 carries. That needs to be improved. Defensively, Crimson Tide allowed 4.5 yards a carry on the ground, 385 yards passing on 31 attempts. Bryce Young returned from injury, completing 67%, 445 yards passing, 8.8 yards per attempt on the season. Young 67% completion rate, 8.9 yards per attempt. Bulldogs too one-dimensional, and really the concern for Rogers, 2 season lows in yards per pass attempt came against LSU at 5.1 per attempt, Kentucky at 5.5 per attempt. Play here will be Alabama at minus the 21. Syracuse versus Clemson college football pick for Saturday. Syracuse moved to 6-0 with that 24-9 home win to NC State. Orange gained 389 yards in the win with 179 rushing on 30 carries. They limited the Wolfpack to 255 yards, who were utilizing a backup quarterback. Garrett Schrader completed 64% of his passes, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks, 8.4 yards per attempt. On the season, Schrader career highs 70% completion rate, 9.4 yards per attempt. Clemson 7-0 after their 34-28 road win at Florida State. Tigers moved the ball for 377 yards, only 4 yards to carry on the ground. They did allow the Seminoles 460 yards, giving up 206 rushing on 34 attempts. DJ Uiagalelei completed an ACC conference game high. This is against the ACC conferences, was the best game he's had against a conference opponent this year. 65% completion rate, 3 touchdowns, 8.8 yards per attempt. Orange has had only 1 road game this season, and that was UConn in week 2. They've had close wins at home to Purdue and Virginia and beat NC State, who are without their senior quarterback. Tigers holding opponents to just 2.9 yards per rush and doing a good job getting off the field on third down. The play here will be on Clemson here at minus a 13. Texas A&M versus South Carolina college football pick Saturday. Texas A&M fell to 3-3 after their 24-20 road defeat at Alabama. Aggies had a shot with the win, but incomplete pass, a short touchdown pass attempt deep in Crimson Tide territory in the closing seconds. Aggies posted 323 yards, 70 of it on the ground on 25 carries. They did contain the Crimson Tide pass attack, but allowed 288 rushing yards on 51 carries. Haynes King, 54% completions in the game, 5.5 yards per attempt. This year, King, 58% completions, 5 touchdowns, 5 picks, 6.9 yards per attempt. South Carolina, they're 4-2 after a 24-14 road defeat at Kentucky. Gamecocks, 356 offensive yards with the run game, generated 179 yards on 42 carries. South Carolina limited the Wildcats' ground attack but allowed 178 yards passing on 27 attempts. Oklahoma transfer quarterback Sean Rattler, 74% completion rate, 9.3 yards per attempt in the game. But on the season, Rattler, 75% completions, but 5 touchdowns, 8 picks, 7.6 yards per attempt. Bye week for both teams. Weak home schedule thus far for the Gamecocks, but a 48-7 home defeat to Georgia is also on that schedule at home. Gamecocks averaging 2.5 turnovers a game. Prefer the pass defense on the Aggie side. Play here, Texas A&M -3. Texas versus Oklahoma State college football pick. This one here goes off on Saturday. Texas here, they sit at 5-2 with their 24-21 home win to Iowa State. Longhorns held to a season low 363 yards against that good defensive team. 191 yards rushing on 43 carries. On defense, Texas held the Cyclones' run game to under 3 yards a carry. Now, Longhorns did allow 329 yards passing on 36 attempts. Quinn Ewers, 65% completions in the win, but a season low 6.6 yards per attempt. The signal caller did throw for 3 touchdowns on the year. Ewers here at 68% completion rate, 8.8 yards per attempt. Now, Oklahoma State, they fell to 5-1. That 43-40 road defeat at TCU. Cowboys did move the football for 386 yards, but on defense, Oklahoma State did give up 510 yards, 286 passing. Now, quarterback Spencer Sanders, a season low 44% completion rate, 6.8 yards per attempt. Past 2 Big 12 games, Sanders combining for 47% completions, 6.7 yards per attempt. In Big 12 play, the Cowboys are giving up 498 yards. Longhorns defense on the road surrendering 479 yards with 331 passing. Play here will be Texas and Oklahoma State to go over to 62. UCLA versus Oregon college football pick Saturday. UCLA come off a bye week. They're 6-0 with their 42-32 home win to Utah. Bruins move the football for 502 yards, rushing for 203 on 38 carries. On defense, they did allow the Utes 479 yards, 287 in the passing game on 34 carries. Utah did run for nearly 5 yards a carry on the Bruins. Dorian Thompson-Robinson, a completion rate here of 78%, season high 13 yards per attempt. 4 touchdown passes, a pick, and a rushing touchdown in the win. On the season, the senior quarterback is completing 75%, 9.3 yards per attempt. Oregon hits their bye week 5-1 after a 49-22 win at Arizona. Ducks gained 580 yards offensively in the win, rushing for 306 yards on 41 carries. They did limit the Wildcats' run-in and passing attack. Now, Bo Nix, 80% completion rate in the win, 10.6 yards per pass attempt. He did rush for 70 yards and 3 touchdowns. 8 rushing touchdowns the past 4 games on the season. Nix career highs here, 70% completion rate, 8.2 yards per attempt. Running quarterbacks have really historically given UCLA fits on defense the past several years. But I think in this one, offenses rule the day. The play here, UCLA and Oregon over 69.5. West Virginia versus Texas Tech college football pick. This one goes off here on Saturday. West Virginia improved to 3-3 after their 43-40 home win to Baylor. Mountaineers moved the football for 500 yards, 217 rushing on 37 carries. WVU did give up 590 yards to the Bears with 421 passing on 37 attempts. JT Daniels, 65% completion rate in the win, 7.6 yards per attempt. The Georgia transfer on the year completing 64%, 6.8 yards per attempt. Now, Texas Tech drops at 3-3. It was a 41-31 road defeat at Oklahoma State, I should say. Red Raiders, a season high against an FBS school here. 527 yards of offense. The team ran for just over 3 yards per carry. Defensively, they allowed the Cowboys to pass for 297 yards on 45 pass attempts. Donovan Smith had to miss the game due to injury. He returned to practice early last week. And he does have a shot at playing. Smith on the season, 66% completion rate, 7 yards per attempt. The Red Raiders at home, 3-point overtime wins at Texas and Houston in FBS competition. The Red Raiders pass defense allowing 13.4 yards per completion. West Virginia allowing 15.3 yards per completion. These defenses give up big plays. Play here, West Virginia and Texas Tech over 68.5. Washington versus California college football pick Saturday. Washington is 5-2 after their 49-29 home win to Arizona. Huskies an FBS high 595 yards offensively, 79 on the ground on 29 carries. They did limit the Wildcats' ground attack, but allowed 400 passing yards on 35 attempts. Michael Penix, a season-high 82% completion rate. That was in victory. 4 touchdowns, 12 yards per pass attempt. On the season, the Indiana transfer, a 67% completion rate, 20 touchdowns, 4 picks, a career high, 8.9 yards per attempt. Cal falls to 3-3 after their 20-13 road overtime defeat at Colorado. Golden Bears produced 297 yards in defeat with 35 rushing on 22 carries. Jack Plummer completed 56% of his passes in defeat, ties the season low, 5 yards per pass attempt. Plummer's passing performance better at home. Huskies pass defense on the road, well, they're giving up 278 yards, 73% completion rate, 8.8 yards per attempt. Now, Golden Bears have thrown average 264 yards per a game at home. Huskies on the road throw for 334 yards. Play here, Washington, California, over 54.5. Boise State versus Air Force college football pick Saturday. Boise State improved to 4-2 with their 40-20 home win to Fresno State. Broncos 443 offensive yards, rushing for 316 on 52 carries. Defense was really strong for Boise State, holding the Bulldogs to under 3 yards a carry at 134 passing on 26 attempts. Taylor Green, a 55% completion rate, 7.1 yards per attempt. He is a dual threat quarterback. Now in the year, Green has 61% completions, 2 touchdowns, 3 picks, 5.9 yards per attempt. He has run 30 times for 229 yards and 4 touchdowns. Air Force 5-2 after their 42-7 road win at UNLV. Falcons posted 420 yards offensively, 406 rushing on 76 carries. Strong defensive performance here, holding the Rebels to 3 yards a carry on the ground, 118 passing on 15 attempts. Now, Hazik Daniels attempted just 2 passes in the win. He rushed the ball for 10 yards on 4 carries. On the season, though, Daniels, 47% completion rate, 9.9 yards per attempt. Boise State is holding opponents to only 2.9 yards per carry on the ground. Broncos' run game is journeying 4.9 yards a carry. Boise State defense holding opponents just 235 yards a game. The team is playing better with Green. Understanding the play here will be on Boise State at plus the 2.5. Cincinnati versus SMU college football pick Saturday. Cincinnati improved to 5-1 with their 28-24 home win to USF. Bearcats gained 414 yards in the win, running successfully with 221 yards on 37 carries to defend the Bulls' pass well, but allowed 224 rushing yards on 34 carries. Eastern Michigan transfer Ben Bryant completed 71% of his passes in the win with 8.5 yards per attempt. Bryant had 2 touchdowns and 2 picks. On the year, Bryant has 66% completion rate with a career high 8.4 yards per attempt. Bearcats are coming off the bye and Bryant questionable. Backup Evan Prater has thrown a career 19 passes for Cincinnati. Now SMU, they go to 3-3 after their 40-34 home win to Navy. Mustangs offense produced 441 yards with 105 rushing on 21 carries. They did allow the midshipmen to run for 372 yards on 77 carries. Tanner Mordecai, a career high 74% completions in the win, 3 touchdowns and 12.4 yards per attempt. Year-to-date, Mordecai 61% completions, 8.5 yards per attempt. Here in this one, the play will be here on Cincinnati in this one. Duke versus Miami college football pick Saturday. Duke fell to 4-3 after their 38-35 home defeat to North Carolina. It was a season-high 544 yards of offense for the Blue Devils, who covered that game as a 7-point underdog. Team ran for 299 yards on 41 carries. On defense, Duke did allow, though, 538 yards to that Tar Heels offense, nearly 5 yards a carry on the ground, and 380 passing yards on 38 attempts. Riley Leonard completed 64% of his passes, 8 yards per attempt on the year. Riley, about 66% completion rate, 8 yards per attempt. Now, Miami, they're now 3-3 with that 20-14 road win at Virginia Tech. They got a big lead and then failed to cover, giving up the points late. Hurricanes did move the football for 458 yards. Limited run production. Miami held really a poor offense team in the Hokies to 257 yards. Tyler Van Dyke completed 63% in the win with 351 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and 7.6 yards per attempt. On the season, Van Dyke, 64% completion, 7.5 yards pass attempt. a significant drop over last season. Now, the Hurricanes had struggles in pass defense against North Carolina and Middle Tennessee State. Leonard has been effective moving the team downfield with the pass. The play here will be Duke at plus 8.5. Houston versus Navy college football pick for Saturday. Houston 3-3 after their 33-32 road win at Memphis. Cougars a season high 463 yards, 97 rushing on 23 carries. They did allow about 4 yards per rush in the game with 282 passing yards on 34 attempts. Now Clayton Tune, 63% completion, 6.4 yards per attempt. He had 3 touchdowns and a pick. Season-wide, Tune, 65% completion rate, 7.2 yards per attempt. Navy fell to 2-4 after their 40-34 road defeat at SMU. Midshipman, a season-high of 510 yards with 372 rushing on 77 carries. On defense, Navy surrendered 336 passing yards to the Mustangs on 27 attempts. Ty Levitai completed 43% of his passes, 2 touchdowns, a pick, 6.6 yards per attempt. On the year, Levitai, 47% completions, 2.8 yards per rush attempt. You know, the midshipmen back-to-back games where they've averaged 500 yards of offense. Head-to-head, the overs come in 6 and 7 in this meeting. The play will be Houston Navy over the total of 53. Indiana versus Rutgers college football pick here for Saturday. Indiana fell to 3-4 after their 38-33 home defeat to Maryland. Hoosiers moved the football for 352 yards with only 37 rushing on 31 carries. Defensively, Indiana allowed 270 passing yards on 42 attempts. Missouri transfer quarterback Connor Bazelak completed 69% in defeat, 3 touchdowns, 2 picks, and 7 yards per attempt. Now on the season, Bazelak, a career lows here, 54% completions, 5.6 yards per attempt. Rutgers 3-3 after their 14-13 home defeat to Nebraska. Scarlet Knights moved the football for 348 yards with only 115 yards on 38 carries. They blew a 13-0 halftime lead. Defense held the Cornhuskers to just 304 yards. Noah Vidal completed just 40% of his passes, 8.9 yards per attempt. The Scarlet Knights offense again struggling. Hoosiers running for only 2.7 yards per attempt. The play here will be Indiana Rutgers under 45. Memphis versus Tulane college football pick Saturday. Memphis fell to 4-3 after their 47-45 road overtime defeat to East Carolina. Tigers moved the football for 491 yards, but only 84 rushing on 35 carries. On defense, Memphis did allow 473 yards to the Pirates with 304 passing on 35 attempts. Seth Hennigan, a season-high 73% completions, 2 interceptions, 11 yards per attempt. Year-to-date, Hennigan, 65% completion rate, 12 touchdowns, 3 picks, and 8.2 yards per attempt. Tulane 6-1 after their 45-31 road win at USF. A Green Wave, a season-high 564 yards of offense. They ran it for 235 on 51 carries. They limited the ground attack of the Bulls, but gave up 259 yards passing on 23 attempts. Michael Pratt, 66% completion rate in the win, 9.4 yards per attempt. The Green Wave past 3 games have been against AAC teams, and on defense they're allowing 252 yards passing, 7 yards per pass attempt. Hennigan in great form now for the Tigers, but Memphis in that 3-game span, they're allowing 305 yards passing, 7 yards per attempt. Play here, Memphis at Tulane over 56. Northwestern and Maryland college football pick. This one goes off Saturday. Northwestern 1-5 after their 42-7 home defeat to Wisconsin. Wildcats gained 342 yards in this one, but rushed for only 79 yards on 27 carries. You know, defensively, the Wildcats did give up 515 yards, 5 yards per carry on the ground, 322 passing on 30 attempts. Ryan Helinski, he's in concussion protocol. He left the game. Brendan Sullivan in relief, 65% completion rate, touchdown, and 6.7 yards per attempt. You know, that's been the sophomore's only action in his career. Now, Maryland, they're 5-2 after their 38-33 road win at Indiana. Terrapins posted 442 yards, and they ran it for 172 on 40 carries. They stuffed the Hoosiers on the ground on defense, but allowed 315 passing yards on 43 attempts. Talia Tagovailoa will be a game-time decision with that knee injury. He did complete 64% in the win, 2 touchdowns, and 6.9 yards per attempt. On the season, 72% completion rate, 8.5 yards per attempt. The Wildcats have been held to 7 points in each of their past 2 games, and on the road, they're averaging just 241 yards. Terrapins running for 5 yards per game and throwing for 300 yards a game. The play here will be Maryland minus the 14. Pittsburgh versus Louisville college football pick Saturday. Pittsburgh 4-2 after their 45-29 home win to Virginia. Season high for the Panthers as they gained 496 yards with season high 326 rushing on 43 carries. They limited the Hokies on the ground but allowed 277 passing yards on 47 attempts. Gaten Slovis 53% completions with a pick. Season low here 6.1 yards per attempt. On the air, Slovis career low here 61% completion rate, 7.9 yards per attempt. Louisville, they're 3-3 after their 34-17 road win at Virginia. Cardinals moved the football for 473 yards with 198 on the ground on 49 carries. Louisville stuffed the ground attack for the Cavaliers and allowed 313 passing yards on 34 attempts. Malik Cunningham expected to play after missing the Virginia game with a concussion. Season to date, Cunningham 62% completions, 3 touchdowns, 3 picks, 7.2 yards per attempt. That's a career low. He's rushed for 9 touchdowns and 457 yards. Now Slovis underperforming for Pittsburgh. Cunningham's held the key here with his dual threat ability. Play here Louisville minus 2.5. Purdue versus Wisconsin college football pick Saturday. Purdue improved to 5-2 with their 43-37 home win to Nebraska. Boilermakers a season high 608 yards of offense, 217 rushing on 47 attempts. On defense, Purdue did give up 5 yards of carry on the ground, but 354 passing yardage on 29 attempts prevented the cover in this one. Aiden O'Connell, 65% completion rate in the win, 391 yards passing, 7.2 yards per attempt. He did throw for 4 touchdowns and a pick on the season. O'Connell, very good here, 66% completions, 7.2 yards per attempt. Now Wisconsin, they fell to 3-4. They lose 34-28 on the road in overtime to Michigan State. The Badgers gained only 283 yards. They ran for 152. Defensively, Wisconsin did allow 389 yards to the Spartans. Graham Mertz, 56% completion rate in the loss, 5.2 yards per attempt. In Big Ten play, Mertz just 59% completions, 8 touchdowns, 3 picks, 7.4 yards per attempt. Badgers have home losses here to Illinois and Washington State, averaging 12 points a game. Prefer O'Connell over Mertz here. The play here, Purdue +2. UCF versus East Carolina college football pick Saturday. UCF 5-1 after their 70-13 home win at Temple. Season high 737 yards of offense for the Golden Knights. With the Knights here with 304 rushing on 41 carries. They limited the Owls' ground attack and allowed 234 passing on 44 attempts. John Plumlee, season highs here, 82% completions, 4 touchdowns, 17 yards per attempt. Plumlee has put up strong numbers in these 3 AAC games. East Carolina 4-3 after their 47-45 home overtime win to Memphis Tigers. Pirates gained 473 yards in the win, rushing for 169 yards on 42 carries. Defensively, ECU limited Memphis on the ground, but allowed 407 passing yards on 37 attempts. Holden Ahlers completed 76% of his passes, 304 yards, 8.9 yards per attempt. In conference, Ahlers 69% completion rate, 8.3 yards per attempt. Now UCF plays their second road game and blew out FAU on the road. Pirates at home producing 465 yards offensively, 5.1 yards per rush. Ahlers' AAC form has been pretty good. To play here, East Carolina +5. UNLV versus Notre Dame college football pick for Saturday. UNLV dropped to 4-3 with their 42-7 home defeat to the Air Force. Rebels gained only 179 yards with 61 rushing on 20 carries. UNLV defense torched against the run, giving up 406 yards on 76 carries. Quarterback Doug Brumfield missed the game. He played only 1 series in the blowout loss to San Jose State. The backup Cameron Friel, 8 of 10 for 108 yards with a touchdown and pick. In the past 2 games, Friel, 72% completions, 8.2 yards per attempt. Notre Dame fell to 3-3 after their 16-14 home defeat to a really down Stanford team. Fine Irish gained only 301 yards, and they rushed for 150 in defeat on 34 carries. Now, Notre Dame did allow 280 passing yards to a pretty good quarterback there. Stanford's pretty good there. 288 yards passing in the loss on 39 attempts. Drew Pine, a season low, 48% completions, 5.6 yards per attempt. On the season, Pine, 67% completion rate, 10 touchdowns, 2 picks, 7.4 yards per attempt. Fine Irish hasn't blown out teams. They've had recent 7-point home win to Cal, which UNLV was competitive against on the road. Play here will be UNLV +24.5. Vanderbilt versus Missouri college football pick Saturday. Vanderbilt sits at 3-4 after their 55-0 road defeat at Georgia. Commodores really struggled offensively, just 150 yards for the game, 45 rushing on 23 carries. On defense, they allowed 5 yards per rush, 387 passing on 41 attempts. A.J. Swan, 52% completions, 105 yards, 4.6 yards per attempt. This season, Swan, 61% completions, 7.2 yards per attempt. In Missouri, they dropped to 2-4 after that 24-17 road defeat at Florida. Tigers offense produced 370 yards, running for under 4 yards a carry. They only allowed 66 passing yards on 14 attempts, but the Gators ran for 231 yards on 32 carries. Brady Cook, a season-high 73% completion rate, 7.3 yards per attempt, but 2 picks. This season, Cook carried 65% completions, 7.1 yards per attempt. Tigers defense has kept Missouri in games in their covers against Florida, Georgia, and Auburn. In the play here, Vanderbilt and Missouri under 51. Akron versus Kent, college football pick. This one goes off here on Saturday. Akron 1-6 after their 28-21 home defeat to Central Michigan. Zips held only 287 yards running for 20 on 20 carries. And I'm sorry, they ran for 20 yards on 28 carries. Defensively, they struggled really against the run, surrendering 199 yards or rushing yardage to the Chippewas on 45 carries. Now, DJ Irons did complete 66% of his passes in that game, 6.7 yards per attempt. On the season, Irons, he's really lifted up this program. 66% completions, 6.7 yards per attempt. Now, Kent, they're 2-5 after their 52-31 road defeat at Toledo. Golden Flashes gained 393 yards, running for 231 on 46 carries. They were outscored 24-0 in the second half. Kent allowed 493 yards to the Rockets, giving up nearly 5 yards a carry on the ground, and 263 passing yards on 22 attempts. Colin Sclee, only 50% completions, a pick at a season low, 6.2 yards per attempt. On the year, Sclee, 60% completion rate, 8.6 yards per attempt. The Zips have covered 3 of 4 as DJ Irons has really improved the offensive efficiency for this team. Golden Flashes, they don't pressure the quarterback enough. Past 3 games, Kent allowing 10.2 yards per pass attempt. The play will be Akron at plus 19.5. Arizona State versus Stanford, college football pick Saturday. Arizona State 2-4 with their 45-38 home win to Washington. Sun Devils moved the football for 397 yards, 156 rushing on 32 carries. On defense, ASU surrendered 324 passing yards on 54 attempts. Florida transfer quarterback Emory Jones, 78% completion rate in the win, only 6.6 yards per attempt before leaving due to a concussion. He attempted 9 passes. Now, Jones was cleared to resume football activities in practice this week. On the year, Jones, 63% completions, 7.4 yards per attempt. Stanford's are 2-4. They come off a 16-14 road win at Notre Dame. Cardinal offense gained 385 yards in the win, 97 of it rushing. Defensively, they limited the Fighting Irish pass attack to just 151 yards on 27 attempts. Tanner McKee, an FBS high 68% completion rate, 288 passing yards, 7.6 yards per attempt. This season, McKee, 64% completions, 8 yards per attempt. ASU defense has struggled on the road, surrendering 475 yards with 308 passing and 8.2 yards per attempt. Prefer McKee over Jones. Play here, Stanford minus 2.5. Arkansas State versus Louisiana, college football pick for Saturday. Arkansas State fell to 2-5 with their 20-19 road defeat at Southern Miss. Second straight game for the Red Wolves to go under 300 yards of offense. Team ran for only 50 yards on 31 carries. Defensively, they allowed over 4 yards a carry on the ground, 177 passing yards on 32 attempts. James Blackman, 73% completion rate and loss, 2 touchdowns, 6.9 yards per attempt. Season-wide, a career high, 69% completions, 11 touchdowns, 1 pick, 7.9 yards per attempt. Now, Louisiana 3-3 with their 23-13 road win at Marshall. Raging Cajuns produced 338 offensive yards. They ran it for 108 yards on 34 carries. Ben Woldridge, 58% completions of the win, 2 touchdowns, 7.9 yards per attempt. Woodridge this year, 63% completion rate, 6.5 yards per attempt. Now, Louisiana, they're defending well, but the offense is the concern. They run over 60% of the time and gain only 3.7 yards per attempt. But the Red Wolves pass defense has been very poor here on the road, where they're giving up 296 yards, 16 yards per pass completion. Would expect a higher percentage of passes by Blackman here. The play here, Louisiana minus the 6.5. Boston College, Wake Forest college football pick Saturday. Boston College fell to 2-4 after their 31-3 home defeat to Clemson. Eagles gained only 254 yards in defeat, 34 rushing on 30 carries. Notre Dame transfer quarterback Phil Jurkovich, boy, moving backwards here. Season low, 47% completions, 4.7 yards per attempt. Past three ACC games, Jurkovich 62% completions, 7.1 yards per attempt. Now Wake Forest 5-1 after their 45-10 home win to Army. Demon Deacons gained 488 yards offensively in the win. They ran it for 221 yards on 42 carries. Defensively, they did give up 407 yards to that Black Knights team there. 225 rushing on 53 carries. Sam Hartman, 68% completions in the win, a season high, 12.9 yards per attempt. BC on the road, losses by 30 at Florida State, 17 at a down Virginia Tech team. In those road games, the Eagles averaged just 195 yards. Play here, Wake Forest minus the 20.5. Bowling Green versus Central Michigan college football pick. This one goes off here on Saturday. Bowling Green 3-4 with their 17-13 home win to Miami, Ohio. Falcons gained only 325 yards in the win, 176 of them rushing on 44 attempts. Good defensive performance by Bowling Green, holding the Red Hawks to 189 yards with 91 yards passing on 17 attempts. Matt McDonald completed 55% with a pick and 5.1 yards per attempt on the season. McDonald, 56% completion, 6.2 yards per attempt. Central Michigan 2-5 after their 28-21 road win at Akron. Chippewas just 337 yards of offense against the Zips with 199 on the ground with 44 carries. CMU did limit the Zips run game but surrendered 267 passing yards on 39 attempts. Daniel Richardson, 62% completions in the win, a touchdown, and 6.6 yards per attempt. Season-wide, Richardson career low here, 56% completions, 6.2 yards per attempt. Now, the Falcons held to 24 points total the past two games. You know, Richardson form really a concern for the Chippewas. The play here, Bowling Green and Central Michigan under 50. BYU versus Liberty college football pick. This one is on Saturday. BYU fell to 4-3 after their 52-25 home defeat to Arkansas. Cougars gained 471 yards on loss. They ran for under 4 yards a carry. And defense really was torched. BYU allowed 644 yards, over 7 yards a carry, 367 passing on 40 attempts. It was just an SEC team just looking a lot bigger and stronger there on the field. Jaron Hall, 63% completion rate in the loss, 3 touchdowns a pick, 8.7 yards per attempt. You know, this season, Hall, 68% completion rate, 8.4 yards per attempt. Liberty, 6-1 after their 21-20 home win to FCS Gardner-Webb. Poor offensive output here, 315 yards, 93 rushing on 29 carries. And that was against an FCS team. You know, defensively, the Flames held Gardner-Webb on the ground and allowed 239 yards passing on 44 attempts. Jonathan Bennett here, 57% completion rate, a touchdown, 2 picks, 7.4 yards per attempt. Now, season-wide, Bennett just 50% completion rate, 6.6 yards per attempt. You know, the past four opponents for Liberty were Gardner-Webb, UMass, Old Dominion, and Akron. Not a very tough schedule. You know, the past 3 games against weak opponents, the Flames averaging only 338 yards, 4.1 yards per rush, and even more worrisome here is 50% completion rate. You know, Hall is just outperforming Bennett by a wide margin. Play here will be BYU -7. Colorado versus Oregon State college football pick Saturday. Colorado improved to 1-5 with their 20-13 home win in overtime to California. Buffs offense produced 328 yards, 118 of it rushing on 35 carries. Colorado held the Golden Bears run game to under 2 yards a carry and allowed 262 passing yards on 52 attempts. Owen McCown will be a game-time decision due to an injury and limited participation in practice. He completed 62% of his passes in the win with a pick and season-low 5 yards per attempt. J.S. Shrout, a sophomore, is the backup. Lost the starting job with just a 45% completion rate, 4.5 yards per attempt, in his 4 appearances. Oregon State 5-2. They come off a 24-10 home win to Washington State. Beavers moved the ball for 344 yards. They rushed it for 203 on 47 carries. They stuffed the Cougars' run game to just 1 yard a carry. for the game. Now, Ben Gulbranson, the new starter, 50% completion with a season low of 5.9 yards per attempt in the game. On the season, Gulbranson, 61% completions, 3 touchdowns, 3 picks, 8 yards per attempt. Buffalo's offensive production leaves little to be desired on the road. They're averaging just 245 yards, while on defense on the road, they're giving up 553 yards, 6.6 yards per rush, 14 yards per completion. Gulbranson, an improvement over the interception-prone Chance Nolan, who throws a lot of multi-interceptions in games. The play here will be Oregon State here at minus 23.5. Eastern Michigan versus Ball State college football pick Saturday. Eastern Michigan fell to 4-3 after their 39-10 home defeat to Northern Illinois. Eagles a season low 226 yards of offense with 29 rushing on 27 carries. On defense, EMU struggled in run defense, giving up 287 yards on 49 carries. Taylor Powell, season low 48% completions with 8.6 yards per attempt. Eagles had a -2 turnover margin. In his MAC games, Powell 58% completions, 9.2 yards per attempt. Ball State 4-3 after their 25-21 home win to UConn. Cardinals gained at 356 yards in the win, 209 rushing on 44 carries. On defense, the Cardinals held the Huskies to 223 yards with 129 passing on 22 attempts. John Paddock's season lows 49% completions, 3.8 yards per attempt. Paddock trending downward the past 2 games, 51% completions in that period, 4.1 yards per attempt. Both teams with offensive issues entering play. The play here will be on Eastern Michigan and Ball State under 58. FAU versus UTEP college football pick. This one goes off on Saturday. FAU fell to 3-4 after their 17-14 home loss here to Rice. Alice generated only 311 yards of offense, 185 rushing on 53 carries. Really strong defensive performance by FAU, holding Rice to just 263 yards, less than 3 yards per rush, at 197 passing on 28 carries. Nkosi Perry here, 54% completions, a touchdown, 4.8 yards per attempt. On the year, the Miami transfer is completing 56% of his passes for 7.2 yards per attempt. UTEP, they moved to 3-4, a 41-31 road defeat at Louisiana Tech, a season high here, 501 yards of offense, 181 rushing on 38 carries. They limited Louisiana Tech on the ground with 266 passing here in the passing game is where they got it, where they gave it up here on 27 attempts. Gavin Hardison, 45% completions, 2 touchdowns, 3 picks, and 6.3 yards per attempt in the game. Now in the year, Hardison really low here, 51% completion rate, 6.7 yards per attempt. Miners have won their past 2 at home, including a 17-point win to Boise State. FAU has struggled on the road, giving up 437 yards, 4.9 yards per rush. Miners defending well at home. The play here will be UTEP at +4. FIU versus Charlotte college football pick. This one on Saturday. FIU fell to 2-4 with their 30-10 home defeat to UTSA. Golden Panthers held to 12 points or fewer in 4 of 5. They gained 323 yards with 137 rushing on 36 carries. Now defensively, FIU allowed 303 yards passing on 39 attempts. Grayson Hall, season low, 50% completions with a pick and 4.8 yards per attempt. This season, Hall, 59% completion rate, 5.5 yards per attempt. Charlotte, they're 1-6 after a 34-20 road defeat at UAB. 49ers offense produced only 327 yards, very limited rushing attack. On defense, Charlotte allowed over 5 yards, a carry on the ground, 231 passing yards on 23 attempts. Chris Reynolds, 58% completions in the loss, touchdown, 2 picks, 8.2 yards per attempt. The senior on the season, a 63% completion rate, 8.5 yards per attempt. The 49ers are giving up 5.7 yards per carry on the ground, 11 yards per pass attempt. Overall yardage allowed per game by Charlotte, 534 yards. Just can't lay double digits with a defense this bad. Play here, FIU +14.5. Fresno State versus New Mexico college football pick Saturday. Fresno State improves to 2-4 after that 17-10 home win to San Jose State. Bulldogs gained 334 yards with 104 rushing on 36 attempts. They limited the Spartans on the ground but allowed 294 yards passing on 46 attempts. Bulldogs survived 3 turnovers. Logan 5, 69% completions in the win, 7.2 yards per attempt. On the season, 69% completion rate, touchdown, 5 picks, 7.3 yards per attempt. New Mexico falls to 2-5 after their 21-9 road defeat at San Jose State. 4 straight losses for the Lobos, scoring 20 or fewer points a game. Offense moved the football for only 269 yards, with 109 on the ground on 42 carries. Lobos defense held the Aggies to only 255 yards. Miles Kendrick, 63% passing and lost with a pick and only 5.3 yards per attempt. On the season, Kendrick, a career low, 59% completions, 6 yards per attempt. Both offenses averaging under 300 yards the last 3 games. On defense, both limiting run production. The play here, Fresno State and New Mexico, under 40.5. Georgia Southern versus Old Dominion college football pick Saturday. Georgia Southern improved to 4-3 with their 49-21 road win at Coastal Carolina. Eagles gained a season-high 590 yards, but only 12 rushing. They did give up 675 yards there on defense with 5 yards a carry and 468 passing on 48 attempts. Buffalo transfer Kyle Van Treese, 59% completion rate, 578 passing yards with 9 yards per attempt. On the season, Van Treese here, 60% completion rate, 17 touchdowns, 12 picks, 7.2 yards here per attempt. Now, Old Dominion, they improved here to 3-3 after their 49-21 road win at Coastal Carolina. Now, that win for Georgia Southern came against James Madison, by the way. We're looking here at Old Dominion. They beat Coastal Carolina here. Now, it was a season high of 525 yards offensively for the Monarchs, 324 rushing on 31 carries. Defensively, they limited the chance to clears to 2 yards a carry, but surrendered 366 passing yards on 38 attempts. Hayden Wolf, a career high here. Career highs. 75% completion is in the game, 11.3 yards per attempt. On the year, Wolf, 58% completion rate, 7.3 yards per attempt. Eagles giving up 5.6 yards per attempt on the ground. Monarchs have found a run game. The play here will be on Georgia Southern Old Dominion over a total of 65.5. Hawaii versus Colorado State college football pick Saturday. Hawaii 2-5 after their 31-16 home win to Nevada. Warriors gained 396 yards in the win, 223 rushing on 46 attempts. Sound defensive performance for Hawaii, holding the Wolfpack to 277 yards with 188 passing on 38 attempts. Braden Schrager, just 52% completions, 6.9 yards per attempt. On the season, Schrager, 57% completions, 3 touchdowns, 5 picks, 6.2 yards per attempt. Colorado State is 1-5 after their 17-13 home defeat to Utah State. Another light offensive performance for the Rams as they gained only 262 yards with 99 rushing. Colorado State has been held to under 300 yards in all 6 games this season, with 262 yards gained last week, a season high. Quarterback Clay Millen practiced this week, training to starting on Saturday after missing the past 2 games. Millen on the year is completing 74% of his passes, 7.3 yards per attempt. But Colorado State's run game is just generating 2.3 yards a carry. Rams have scored no greater than 19 points in any one of their games. They play here Hawaii at plus the 5.5. Marshall versus James Madison college football pick Saturday. Marshall fell to 3-3 with their 23-13 home defeat to Louisiana. The Reading Herd, a poor offensive performance, 276 yards for the game. The team ran for 139 yards on 44 carries. Defensively, they limited the Raging Cajuns to 338 yards with 230 passing on 30 attempts. Texas Tech transfer Henry Colombi, 69% completion rate, 68 yards, 5.2 yards per attempt. This season, Colombi, 73% completion rate, 7.4 yards per attempt. James Madison fell to 5-1 with their 45-38 road defeat at Georgia Southern. Dukes, a season-high 675 yards of offense with 207 rushing on 40 carries. They stuffed the Eagles' ground attack but allowed 578 passing yards on 64 attempts. Todd Centillo, 58% completion in the game. That was a season low. 2 touchdowns and 3 picks. Dukes finished with a -3 turnover margin. On the season, Centillo, 64% completions. He's got 17 touchdowns, 4 picks, and 9.4 yards per attempt. Now, James Madison at home has been dominant. Marshall's road loss at Bowling Green and fell at Troy, scoring 7 points plus gaining only 174 yards. Play here will be on James Madison here at -13. Northern Illinois versus Ohio college football pick Saturday. Northern Illinois moved to 2-5 after their 39-10 road win at Eastern Michigan. Huskies moved the ball for 410 yards behind a really strong rushing attack, gaining 287 yards on 49 carries. NIU stuffed the EMU run game, surrendering 29 yards on 27 carries. Rocky Lombardi was back in the lineup after missing 3 games. A completion rate of 73% in the win, 7.7 yards per attempt. He did throw 15 passes. The day Lombardi career high here, 67% completions, 8.6 yards per attempt. Ohio 4-3 with their 33-14 road win at Western Michigan. Bobcats posted at 383 offensive yards with 119 rushing on 35 carries. They did limit WMU to 84 rushing yards on 31 carries. Curtis Warwick, 65% completion rate in the win, nearly 8 yards per pass attempt. He did have a pick in there. Now, season-wide, Warwick career highs here, 70% completions, nearly 9 yards per attempt. Bobcats defense, though, this year gave up 520 yards a game, 367 passing, 9.1 yards per attempt. Lombardi back producing career-high numbers, and the run game is clicking. The play here will be Northern Illinois at -2.5. North Texas versus UTSA college football pick. This one goes off on Saturday. North Texas improved to 4-3 after their 47-27 home win to Louisiana Tech. Mean Green, a season high 671 yards of offense. Oh my goodness, they ran the ball like crazy here. 475 rushing yards on 47 attempts. They limited the Bulldogs on the ground, but surrendered 424 yards passing on only 37 attempts. Austin Ani, 55% completion rate in the win, 9.8 yards per attempt. Ani on the year, 56% completions, 8.6 yards per attempt. Now, UTSA, they're 5-2 after their 30-10 road win at FIU. Roadrunners gained 433 yards with just over 3 yards to carry on the ground. They limited FIU to only 323 yards in the game. Now, Frank Harris, 69% completion rate in the game, 303 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, 8.7 yards per attempt. Looking at on the numbers, the season-wide numbers here for Harris, 69% completion rate, 8.8 yards per attempt. Harris, the more accurate passer, and the Mean Green's giving up 5.3 yards per rush on the road. North Texas recent road games allowed 44 at Memphis, 58 at UNLV. The play here, UTSA at -10. Rice versus Louisiana Tech college football pick Saturday. Rice 3-3 after their 17-14 road defeat at FAU. Another light offensive performance for the Rice Owls, producing 261 yards, 64 of it rushing on 23 carries. They did limit FAU to only 311 yards with 126 passing on 26 attempts. TJ McMahon, a season low 35% completion rate, 7 yards per attempt. He threw for a touchdown but 3 picks on the season. McMahon, 59% completion rate, 10 touchdowns, 10 picks, 7.8 yards per attempt. Louisiana Tech, they're 2-4 after a 47-27 road defeat at North Texas. They moved the football for 504 yards, but only 80 of it rushing on 38 carries. Bulldogs struggled in defense. They gave up 671 yards, 475 rushing on 47 attempts, over 10 yards a carry. Parker McNeil, season high 70% completion rate, though, 11.5 yards per attempt, 2 touchdowns. It is back-to-back road games for Rice. At home, Bulldogs running for 5.5 yards a carry, and Rice giving up 5 yards per rush. The play here will be Louisiana Tech here at +3.5. San Diego State and Nevada college football pick. This one goes off on Saturday. San Diego State 3-3 after their 16-14 home win to Hawaii. Aztecs gained 417 yards in the win, 95 rushing on 35 carries. Aztecs did allow 5 yards per carry to the Warriors with 196 passing on 34 carries. Jalen Maiden completed 67% of the passes in the win with a touchdown and 8.9 yards per attempt. He threw 6 passes last year in the mop-up duty. Nevada fell to 2-5 with their 31-16 road defeat of Hawaii. Wolfpack gained only 277 yards in the game, 89 of it rushing on 28 carries. On defense, Nevada did surrender 223 rushing yards to the Warriors on 46 carries. Nate Cox, 59% completion rate, and they lost 5.1 yards per attempt. This season, Cox, 55% completions, 5.8 yards per attempt. On the road, San Diego State averaging only 143 yards. Wolfpack, despite rebuilding, has moved the football at home. Aztecs' run defense no longer dominant as it once was, as they're giving up 4.7 yards to carry on the ground. Play here will be on Nevada +7. San Jose State versus New Mexico State college football pick. This one goes off on Saturday. San Jose State fell to 4-2, a 17-10 road defeat at Fresno State. Spartans produced only 331 yards on loss, 37 rushing on 23 carries. Defensively, they held the Bulldogs to 334 yards, 230 through the air on 32 attempts. Hawaii transfer Chevan Cordero, season lows here, 49% completions, 6.5 yards per attempt. Season to date, Cordero here, 56% completions, 7.7 yards per attempt. New Mexico State is 2-5 after their 21-9 home win to New Mexico. Aggies gained only 225 yards in the win. They rushed for 106 yards here on 31 carries. They defended well, limiting the Lobos to 269 yards with under 3 yards per rush. Diego Pavia was benched. Freshman Gavin Freaks completed 59% of his passes with 2 touchdowns and 7 yards per attempt in the game. Now in the year, Freaks 48% completion rate, 6.5 yards per attempt. New Mexico State has been held to under 250 yards of offense in 3 of their past 4 games, with the exception being that home game in Hawaii. Spartans have scored 34 or greater against the Aggies the past 3 games. Don't trust the offense of New Mexico State, who put up only 7 at home to FIU 3 weeks ago. Play here, San Jose State here at minus the 21.5. Southern Miss and Texas State college football pick Saturday. Southern Miss improves to 3-3 with their 20-19 home win to Arkansas State. Golden Eagles gained 345 yards in the game. They ran the ball for 168 yards on 37 carries. Defensively, Southern Miss limited their Red Wolves on the ground, just 50 yards on 31 carries. Zacha Wilkie completed 55% of his passes for 6.6 yards per attempt. Wilkie had a touchdown, 2 picks, and has thrown 5 interceptions here the past 2 games. On the year, Wilkie 57% completions, 6.3 yards per attempt. Texas State 3-4, a 17-14 road defeat at Troy. Offense generated only 293 yards, 86 of them on the ground on 28 carries. Bobcats limited the Trojans' ground attack but allowed 299 passing yards on 28 attempts. Lane Hatcher, 65% completion rate with 6.5 yards per attempt in the game. Now looking at the year numbers, not too far from this past game. Hatcher, 63% completions for this season, 6.7 yards per attempt. Bobcats have played well at home, including a 12-point win to Appalachian State. On the road, Southern Miss averaging only 230 yards, rushing for 1.7 yards a carry. Play here, Texas State plus 2.5. Toledo versus Buffalo college football pick. This one goes off here on Saturday. Toledo 5-2 after their 52-31 home win to Kent. Rockets a season high 490 offensive yards with 227 rushing on 49 carries. On defense, they limited the Golden Flashes to 50% completion rate, but nearly 5 yards a carry on the ground. DeQuan Finn, an FBS season high 73% completions, 6 touchdowns and 12 yards per attempt on the year against the MAC. Finn 66% completions, 11 touchdowns, no picks, 9.6 yards per attempt. He's averaged 6 yards per rush against the MAC and Buffalo 4-3 after their 34-7 road win at UMass. Bulls moved the ball for 480 yards and they rushed it for 203 yards on 38 carries. Defensively, the Bulls held UMass to 220 yards and just over 2 yards per rush attempt. Cole Snyder, 64% completions in the win, 8.9 yards per pass. He had 3 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. Now this season, Snyder against the MAC, 62% completions, 8.2 yards per attempt. Defensively, the Bulls passed 3 games, holding opponents to 319 yards. Playing in Buffalo, always a tough task for these road MAC teams. The play here will be Buffalo plus 7. UL Monroe and Army college football pick. This one goes off on Saturday. UL Monroe 2-5 after their 41-34 road defeat at South Alabama. The Warhawks covered behind 438 yards of offense. Run game produced only 67 on 31 carries. Defensively, UL Monroe surrendered 619 yards to the Jaguars with 5 yards per rush and 420 passing yards on 33 attempts. Chandler Rogers, 74% completion rate, 4 touchdowns, a pick, and 13.7 yards per attempt. Career highs this season for Rogers, 70% completions, 8.6 yards per attempt. Now, Army, they're 2-4 with their 42-17 home win to FCS Colgate, gaining 467 yards. Now, their past 2 games against FBS teams, the Black Knights average only 12 points at Wake Forest and home to Georgia State. No wins against FBS teams, with both wins coming against the FCS. Army defense struggling stopping the run and pass. Rogers improvement for the Warhawks. The key here, the play here will be UL Monroe at plus the 7.5. Utah State versus Wyoming college football pick Saturday. Utah State 3-4 after their 17-13 road win at Colorado State. Aggies moved the ball for 390 yards, 252 rushing on 49 carries. They held the Rams to under 3 yards per rush and 163 passing yards on 33 attempts. Cooper Allegas had completed 75% of his passes, 7.1 yards per attempt, prior to leaving with a concussion. Backup Levi Williams went 2 of 9 for 12 yards in relief and banged up an ankle. Freshman Bishop Davenport, the QB3, went 3 of 9 for 41 yards in double relief. Wyoming 4-3 after a 27-14 road win at New Mexico. The Cowboys gained only 304 yards, 130 rushing on 39 carries. And on defense, they contained the Lobos' passing game and allowed 4 yards a carry on the ground. Edu Peasley just 47% completions in the win with 8 yards per attempt and 2 touchdowns. This season, Peasley 54% completions, 5.9 yards per attempt. Quarterback issues for Utah State may make this a pretty much a running game on both sides. Peasley inaccurate quarterbacking this season. The play here will be Utah State and Wyoming under 45. Western Michigan versus Miami, Ohio college football pick. This one here goes off on Saturday. Western Michigan fell to 2-5 with their 33-14 home defeat to Ohio. Broncos gained only 333 yards in defeat against a poor defensive team with 84 rushing on 31 carries. On defense, they surrendered 383 yards to the Bobcats with 264 passing on 34 attempts. Jack Salopek completed only 55% with a touchdown, 5 picks, and 8 yards per attempt. On the year, Salopek 51% completion rate, 6.4 yards per attempt. Miami, Ohio, 3-4 with their 17-13 road defeat at Bowling Green. Redhawks gained only 189 yards rushing for 98 yards and 34 carries in the game. Defensively, they did limit the Falcons to 325 yards with 149 passing on 29 carries. Avion Smith completed only 53% of his passes, 5.4 yards per attempt. This year, Smith, 52% completion rate, 6 yards per attempt. He's a running quarterback who's averaged about 5 yards a carry on 35 rushes. Both offenses averaging just over 300 yards per game with accuracy issues in the passing game. Past 3 games, WMU holding opponents to just 2.5 yards per rush, but the play here will be on Western Michigan at plus 6.5.